there's certain times in our life that we make choices and changes, and new jobs are a big change. So that new job has got to be like a big experience. It's got to make them remember that forever. They come in like, asking questions. So let's say here's as you're interviewing the employee, like ask what kind of coffee they have. In the first day, have that cup of coffee for them from Starbucks or whatever it is. Make them connect with you emotionally. That's the other part, is we need to connect with our employee. Cool, awesome. Thanks, Raphael. Well, get started here. Raphael and I started like working on a project. How many years ago was that? It was way before COVID, and 2018. When we were doing the next level. So we started this thing called Next Level, and the idea was kind of creating this thing. I think some of you guys in the room with us were planning stages, and it just got kind of carried away, out of hand. And I think now that Raph has kind of brought it all in together, I think it's great to see what we're doing here today. So thanks for having me. I want to go ahead and my goal today is really kind of talk about the state of the industry. What I do a lot of traveling around the country. I do a lot of like big seminars where we do with large groups and stuff like that, and I bring a lot of the information to you today that you might not get on a regular basis. So hopefully this is going to be helpful for you guys in your industries. I know that everyone's in a different place. Some people are working in restaurants, some people are on the trade side, some people are working floors, some people are managing restaurants in different states. So I'll try to keep it so it keeps everybody interested, I guess. Just about myself real quickly. Oops, where am I at here? My computer doesn't show. That's because I'm on the wrong one. All right. So about me, I'm the beverage director for the Cohen Restaurant Group. That's 24 restaurants, San Diego, 2 in Maui, and 1 in Long Beach. I'm also teaching over at San Diego State. I do 4 classes there of wine classes. Sensory evaluation. In fact, I think he's been to most of them. California wine class, Spanish wines, and also South American wines. I'm also the chief spirits judge for the San Diego International Wine Spirits Competition, and then I do wine and spirits judging for a bunch of different competitions around the state, which is a lot of fun. But all this stuff kind of like, I guess people, Raph asked me to come here and talk to you all, and how do I get to doing what I'm doing today? Because it's something that's, I guess, is people think of being the fun part of our industry, right? But I'll give you the reason how I got to that, but it was because I had to really go and work at it for a long time and put a lot of time and energy into it. It wasn't just like overnight. So I became certified sommelier in 2007. I was working in San Francisco at the time, and I'd moved to San Diego, and I'd worked with sommeliers in San Francisco. Didn't really think much about it. It wasn't a thing. It was like people were sommeliers, and it wasn't like no one really talked about it. It was I don't know. It was like there was a sommelier on the floor, and it wasn't really interesting. I was ordering wines and buying wines for the restaurant. Didn't think about it until I came here, and my company says we need you to become a sommelier. I said, all right, well, what do I need to do? I looked it up, took the test, got to become a sommelier. Okay, and then people ask, how did you become a sommelier? Who knows, dude? You guys don't. When you guys became sommeliers, you don't know. You just kind of like took the exam, right? It's like that's what it is. Same thing happened with Cicerone, because we're in that change of like a lot of restaurants going to drinking beer. I got to become a Cicerone, so I went, took the test, Cicerone. Same thing with Tequila Certified, went to take the classes there, and then I'm also on an advisory board at different conferences around the country, and also I did a lot of publications with just writing, because that's kind of how I got my name out there, was writing. And I'll talk more about that at the very end of it all, because I think it's important to get into the nitty gritty, but give you an idea of how I got to where I'm at today because of the things I put into it. But first, let's talk about our beverage industry, what's going on right now. It's a lot of changes in our industry, right? It's crazy. First of all, we know that COVID came in. So we're going to talk about COVID and what happened post-COVID and where we're at today. We're also going to talk about the new consumer and the consumer awareness that we have to deal with today, which is not the same. It's completely different from how it used to be. And then we'll break it down by wine, spirits, beer, and spirits, and what's going on in each kind of category. And then I'll finish off with I think one thing that's really important is demographics, something we don't think about enough. In any industry, especially in our restaurant industry, we need to think about demographics, and I'll kind of break that down as well. First of all, post-COVID. So COVID, for the thing happened after COVID, a lot of low-hanging fruit was there. All this stuff was just hanging out there. People lost jobs. There was brands that no longer existed. There was things that need to be made. So mergers and acquisitions come around, right? All these big companies come in and start gobbling it up. Whoever wins in a downturn, whoever wins in a financial destabilization, the ones with money already, right? So that's who won at the COVID. They're the ones that came in, gobbled it all up, and you see it continue growing that way. And prior to COVID, we know there was an idea of premiumization. People are already going to premium products, but after COVID, we realized, what do we do when we've gone to premiumization? Well, during COVID, it was great because people had money, but now as the inflation starts to increase, where is that money, and do we still have premiumization? Is that still viable? So that's something that's still kind of being questioned right now. But, a lot of us think about our favorite wines, the things we like to have in our restaurants, the things we stand behind, and we have like passion behind it all, right? But at some point, you never know. That's going to be gobbled up by somebody big. And does that stop being what it was at that point? Or do you no longer like it anymore? Or do you no longer serve it anymore? We got to think about that a little bit sometimes and make those decisions because, at this point, the way I see it, everything's going to be gobbled up at some point, right? And it's just going to be smaller entities of larger companies throughout our restaurants and our lists. So I expect to see more consolidations happening and more price increases because as things consolidate, there's less competition, and then we see the price increase because now they control the price on that. So that's unfortunately where the direction we're headed to. Quantity of products now, even before COVID, there's tons of wineries, there's tons of spirits, there's tons of products out there, right? It's how many actually fit on your menu though, right? Our menus are this big, right? The page. How much is going to fit on your menu and how much is out there? Now, on top of that, how many people are out there selling it, right? And those people who are selling it, how many restaurants and how many stores do they have to go visit? And how many things fit in their bags on a given day? So if you think about all the products out there and how many things fit in a bag in a single day and how many places you can see in a single day, it's this much, right? So you're only seeing, as buyers, we only see this much of the whole thing. And this much of whatever is out there is very, very little, but at the same time, can we afford to see it all? Can we really afford to grab it all, right? So we have to make those kind of like decisions. What is the most important thing for our business? What is going to be an important decision for me as a buyer at a restaurant to make money in that restaurant or to be viable for my position in that restaurant, right? And how do we decide those picks? Because it comes down to relationships. And unfortunately, there's a good side of relationships and the bad side of relationships. The good side of relationships is that you stand behind a product when you like somebody, right? If JC comes and sells me Volcan and I like JC, I'm all about Volcan, right? And then all of a sudden, JC's no longer with Volcan, right? I'm gonna try another tequila now, right? Oh yeah, Volcan's not the same anymore. Yeah, it's changed. It hasn't changed at all, but you think of it that way, right? And we've all done that, but it's going to happen. So if we tie the product to the person that's selling it to us, then we're doing a disservice to our guests and we're doing a disservice to our restaurants. At the same time, if we're buying products based on just product names, then we're doing disservice to our guests as well, because there's some of those things that have product names that don't have anything behind it and need the relationship, because that relationship also means the support you're going to get on the back end as well from that. Are they going to come in and train your staff? Are they going to come in and do events with you? Are they going to come in and do promotions with you, right? That's important as well. But what happens is that during COVID, we had a lot of layoffs, right? So we've lost a lot of those relationships. And a lot of things you probably now, you're trying to find out what a wine used to have, you can't find it anymore because the vendor's no longer there, or that the little broker closed down and another winery's doing direct, and you don't want to buy directly from the winery because you got to do another invoice and all this different stuff, right? So it's important that when we're doing this thing and looking at relationships is that, build those relationships, but then make sure that those relationships go both ways. And one of the biggest things I see as buyers is we always think of the seller to do it for us. They're working for us. They don't work for us. The seller doesn't work for us, right? Right? Just like we don't work for our guests, we give our guests a experience, right? But we're there to help them get that experience, and our vendors are there to help our guests get that experience as well. So we're partners in this, right? So we got to treat our vendors as partners, and the relationships got to go both ways. So when they need a little help, we got to give them a little help. When you need a little help from them, they should give you a little help as well. So how do you do that with so many relationships? It's kind of like having a lot of boyfriends and girlfriends, right? So it's really important that we kind of like hone in on those relationships and use them so that you can be a mutual partner, right? Someone who's going back and forth with that vendor, right? That's really important with this. And in my position, I have to limit it. I can't have that many relationships. It makes it very difficult when you have that many restaurants to really keep it honed in, because it's so many different buyers out there, and every single buyer has a different mindset. And if they all do their own thing, then I can't guarantee the same support for that vendor as I'm gonna expect from them, because it goes both ways. They want volume, and I want their support. And how am I gonna make that happen for them? So it's important to have that going both ways. The 3-tier system is also important in that we've changed a little bit here as we've going out of COVID. A lot of regulations changed, so that's kind of helped us out on the restaurant side of things, where we can now sell directly to consumers and things like that. I hope you guys take that and take it all the way and keep going with it, because that's the only way you make more money, just a little extra to your bottom lines. But the other idea is that we don't understand what the difference between the distributor, the supplier, and the wholesaler is sometimes. And as buyers, we always just think of the person who's selling the wine to us as the person who's behind that wine. Well, it's not. The person who made the wine is probably the one with all the money, right? They're the ones that has the marketing budget, or the supplier, the person who imports it, or then you have the distributor who their only job is really to get it on a truck from one point from one warehouse to your place, right? And so many of us rely on our distributors and what our distributors say, and our distributors really don't know shit, to be honest with you. It's true. It's true. They really don't know. They only know what's in their book and what's in their laptop. And after that, when it's no longer there, they don't know anymore, right? So we need to make sure that we're working with the person that actually has that connection, whether it's the supplier or the winemaker, or the person directly related with that relationship with that particular brand. And we need to work with we need to utilize them to get that guest service, right? That high-end guest service. And we got to bring them into the restaurants to do that with us. So coming back from COVID, we're going to see a lot of changes and rethinking the way we go into it, because now we have a new consumer. And this consumer's coming back with a lot more awareness, right? They have a lot more ability to get information. We've seen that already since the internet, right? And it's just expounding every year bit more and more and more, right? Here's a little slide that kind of shows you this is the frequency of dining in a beverage consumption in dining establishments. In fine dining, you can see that in 2019, 59% people were consuming on premise, right? 2021, it dropped down to 48%. In 2022, it's 42% of beverage consumption on premise in fine dining, okay? And you can see that same thing happens across entertainment, like those kind of like bowling alleys and pool halls and things along those lines. There's independent restaurants, hotel chains, and casual dining. You can see across the board, people's consumption of beverages has declined since 2019. It came back. We thought it was going to be really strong in 2021. They came back excited and everything, but they're not buying as much as they used to buy. And part of that is that premiumization, right? We've gone to premiumization. Things are costing more, and we're offering a higher dollar amount for things now as our menu prices have gone up. So the amount of being ordered is changing too. They've also got more beverage choices, and part of that is non-alcoholic beverages. Non-alcoholic beverages is something we should all be looking at on our menus. If you haven't done that already, you're behind the 8 ball on it. Start looking into the spirits, start looking at different things you can do, because that's money sitting there waiting for you guys that you can use and build those programs up. Okay? Because there is a consumer out there, and there's quite a lot of consumers out there that want that experience but don't have an option to, because they don't want to drink that day. So let's take advantage of it, bring it in. And then the other thing is what's in it, we're talking about additive-free tequilas, right? Everyone wants to know what's in it, right? Why is the natural wine movement happening? Why? Because everybody wants to know what's in it, right? Does anybody have the Yuka app? You guys don't have Yuka?
I do.
You have it? Do you use it?
No? I like the idea of it.
So the Yuka app is really interesting. It's an app that you can go. It's made for makeups and also for foods. So if you just I go to Costco and I'm picking up my things for my kids, and I go through, I scan the label and the barcode, and it tells you what's in it. If it's good for you or not good for you. It tells you how much sugar is in there, how much sodium is in there. If it's not good for you, it gives you another alternative of another item that's similar to it that might be good for you. So guests have this now, right? And they're thinking that. So now we had to start thinking about that as well. What is in it, and making sure our guests know that, and highlighting that on the menus, because that's very, very important. People are gaining away from that. Also, the fact that, in the EU, we're now having, you have to put what's in the wine on the labels, so your labels got to have the nutritional information. Well, that's going to come to the States eventually. When the EU does it, it's going to happen here at some point. So we just got to get ready for that. So 44% of consumers that actually go out to dine decide on where they're going to dine based on the alcohol that they're serving, or the alcohol choices there. 44%, that's a lot. 64% of millennials choose where they're going to dine based on what they're drinking. So we have to keep that in mind. So when we're making our menus, putting thought into the drinks is very important. The other thing is too that consumers always battling this thing: price and value versus experience. What are they looking for? Well, after COVID, it was all experience. Everybody came back for experience. No one cared about price anymore. That wasn't an issue after COVID. They had money in the bank. They're coming back. They're spending their money. 2021 goes around and we're in 2022. And what happened now? It starts dying down, right? But they're still looking for that experience. That's what they're looking for right now. And it's now, if you look at any marketing company out there that you see of, like, whether it's a makeup or a Pepsi Cola or a camera or whatever they're selling to you, it's how does that item make you feel? It's connecting with emotions. And people are looking for that emotion connection because we've been so out of that emotional connection for so long. COVID just took it all out of us, right? And now it's important for us to get back to that emotional connection with our guests. So focusing on experiences is where we're seeing that. And I'll say that because, price versus value. What do you do on a slow night? What do you guys do like on slow nights typically? What's the typical thing the restaurant would do on a slow night? Well, cut service, sure. Okay, that's one way to handle your P&L. But what else do we do? How do we bring guests in on slow nights? Specials, deals, right? I'm going to have the cheapest beer in the block. I'm going to have the cheapest calls in the block, right? And what does that do for you? What's that?
Lowers your value.
It lowers your value because the people who come in aren't the guests you really want in your restaurant anyways. Right? You end up having a late happy hour with somebody there, and they're all a bunch of people who are just kind of like drinking a lot and not tipping the employees. Their employees are upset. They don't want to work late nights any longer. They have to clean the bathroom because everyone peed all over the seats everywhere. And it's like, that's the kind of consumer you're looking for. But what should we do on slow nights? Let's think of it differently. Let's think of slow nights as being the time where we actually connect with people who actually came into our restaurant. So the slow night should be like the experience night. That's the night you're going to go and just blow your guest away. You're going to connect with that guest, and they're going to come back over and over again because that night you were there, you just gave them an experience that was unequivocal anywhere else because you have the time to do that. So I would get away from the pricing and doing that and focus on that experience with that guest on that slow night because that's where you want. You want that guest to come back. Any questions so far? I'm going quick, so.
For the distributor, the supplier, and the winemaker buyer?
Yeah, so.
Really quickly, but it was a lot of really good information.
Yeah, so the idea is to understand what each tier is responsible for. So the producer is going to be producing the product. They're the ones with the finances. They're the ones that actually are going to be investing to sell their product. They invest by hiring or an importer or a supplier to come and sell that to a distributor because we can't buy directly from them in the United States. So we have to go through the tier of the distributor. The distributor is the housing unit, the warehouse. That's your Southern, that's your RNDC, that's your Breakthrough, that's the person you call, and they put the order in. The truck gets from one point to the other to your restaurant. That's that. And then the other one is you, the seller, the retailer, and of course the consumer is the one that buys from us. So along the way is to understand what each tier is responsible for, because a lot of times I'm never going to work with so-and-so distributor ever again because they couldn't get their product on truck or whatever. Well, was it their fault or was it the supplier's fault because they didn't put their PO in? Or was it because the producer stopped producing that SKU or for that year? Who never know. So you have to dig deep into it before you make those irrational decisions on what you're going to work with and not work with, because it does happen that we end up doing that. I'll give you an example. We did a private label I won't say the name of the distributor. I did a private label directly with the supplier. Supplier says, I'm going to guarantee you this juice at this price point, and then we're going to be able to get it to you, and we're going to get it through a distributor, right? So I got this great deal on this wine, did it for my house chart, my house cab, and then during the COVID situation, like things weren't coming to me anymore. They stopped, and I said, call the distributor, said, where is this wine? They're going, oh, well, they never put the order in. I go, who didn't put the order in? Well, they didn't put the PO in. So I called the supplier. He goes, no, the PO is in there. So they're going back and forth. I'm literally on email, going back and forth, arguing. They're arguing with each other via email. And the whole time, there's the wine is sitting in the warehouse somewhere in California, but no trucks are going to pick it up. So it's there, but no one's picking it up. So I said, okay, I'm taking off the menus. I didn't pre-purchase it, so it didn't matter. So now they're sitting on a private label wine they can't sell anywhere else because it's my label. And it's sitting there in their warehouse. And then maybe 6 months later, the distributor calls me and says, hey, Maurice, can I get rid of this? And go, yeah. And they go, I'll give it to you for $2 a bottle. I'm going, yeah, I'll take it. I'll take it all. Absolutely. Thank you. But that's their fault. But that's how you benefit from that, But it's that's with COVID, there was a lot of that happening, All right. So with wine, it's interesting now as, sales are decreasing in wine. It's been like that since 2013. I know since the economic downturn time, we've been seeing wine sales decreasing, spirit sales increasing, beer sales were increasing for a long time, and now they kind of tapered off and start declining a little bit. So a lot of those things, there's a lot of things out there, a lot of wines out there. A lot of people don't know what they're looking for anymore. What is good anymore, right? It's always difficult to do that. And people are confused. They're confused by the fact of what is sustainable, what is natural, what is this stuff? As a consumer, how do I understand this stuff? They're all looking for that. They all want that, but they don't understand it yet. What is organic? What is biodynamic? And all these different things are becoming a little more confusing for the guests. But at the same time, you can see in leading chains, these are like big chains in the United States. This is huge. In big chains, Bordeaux, Barbera, and Barolo are some of the most increased sales across America. That one never was the case a couple of years ago. It was Malbec, it was Cabernet, it was still Chardonnay and Pinot Grigio, right? But now we're seeing imports that are becoming much more important. That's a good sign for us. That means that if Middle America is drinking Barolo, man, that's great. That's we're going in the right direction. Same thing with white wines. When Chardonnay was the top thing, now your number one hitter on every one of your menus, and that's probably Sauvignon Blanc. It's like Sauvignon Blanc is the new Chardonnay, right? And with sparkling wine, Prosecco's there because of the price value of it. But you can see that Champagne in general is also increasing in sales as well. So we are seeing those things increase, but because a lot of these wines are going to premiumization. How many of you guys can go out to dinner and have a glass of wine for under $16 nowadays? Doesn't happen, huh? It doesn't happen. I remember when I go out, I always make sure my menus always have something in the $9 to $10 range for people. Having a $9 and $10 range wine now is ludicrous. It's like you won't see that anywhere. The price of the wine doesn't increase, right? That $9, $10 wine is now $16, which is insane to me. I can't believe it, right? But the consumers are buying that. But how is that hurting us? They're buying less of it, right? They're buying less. It's hurting our suppliers. That's who it hurts the most. And for us as restaurateurs, our sales are, we have top line sales. We got, $5 more in the last one, but when we got one order of it, we don't get the second order again. So that's kind of the issue with premiumization, where we're heading to. Yeah, we can sell higher dollar amounts. We can sell those $200, $300 bottles of wine now, but we're going to sell a whole lot less of them, unfortunately. Our guests are becoming more adventurous, which is exactly what we want as sommeliers. So that's really important. And again, our guests are also in the whole thing of FOMO. They're always afraid of missing out, but they just don't know what they're missing out on, and they don't know what that is. So we got to kind of show it to them. So as part of what we do in our menus is market to them and show them what they're missing out and why they're missing out on it, right? That's the important part there of this part with wine. That's the way we make it move forward. With spirits and beer, I mean, spirits has been surpassed beer and wine. It's the leading category across the board, and it continues to grow every year. And as gentlemen who are both in the wine and spirits thing, you can probably see your spirit sales have increased over time as people are getting more into craft cocktails and actually looking at spirits. I think the consumer as well during COVID was able to drink more at home, and they chose to drink more spirits and learn how to make cocktails. That was something that they passed the time doing. So we've seen an increase on that. Increase with tequilas and whiskey. Right now, tequila is definitely surpassing. Well, I never thought that vodka would ever be removed as the number one tier. It has now been removed as the number one tier. Vodka is no longer the number one thing because the only thing people drink now is Tito's. So it doesn't matter. And every other vodka doesn't matter what you have. And then it's also, people are looking for that alcohol quantity, you know. How much alcohol can I get for the dollar I'm going to spend? When I walk into the restaurant, if I'm paying $16 for a glass of wine, well, I'll do $16 in that cocktail there or a shot of tequila, right? Because although the alcohol is the same, right? They think of it as being a higher proof or more alcohol to them. So that's where we see people going towards that spirits. And also because it's experiential. They go into one restaurant to a different restaurant and everybody has something different, right? Their version of their margarita or their version of their old fashioned is going to be very different from one to the other. And that's what's making it experiential for them. So they're looking for that experience. Again, people come back to emotional dining. And then in the beer side of it, we just see beer just tanking it right now. It's unfortunate because all that craft beer that everyone's so hyped about, 5 years ago, it's not the same anymore. Craft breweries are dying. Big part of that is the big categories, RTDs, seltzers, and ciders. All that's available in all the retail markets. So now as you're going to the park, and instead of grabbing beer, now you're going to grab a cocktail. You're going to grab a seltzer. It's lighter. You're going to be going for lower ABV, more balanced drinks, right? Getting away from that IPAs and all those kind of bigger style of craft beers. We're looking for those light things. And also there's a lot of competition. So we're seeing that drop off. You can see here, this little slide kind of tells you what the fastest growing specialty drinks are. Sours are the top thing right now. Paloma is one of those things that's coming up that's really popular as well. Whiskey sours, and of course, I think next year we'll have espresso martini on there, I'm sure, for a fact on that. Now, it comes down to demographics. So, how many of you guys are baby boomers here? Baby boomers? Gen X? Gen X, okay. It tells you right here. Okay, all right. Well, if you were born, anybody born in 1965? Okay, no baby boomers. 66 to 81, Gen X. Okay. Then we have 82 to 99. That's millennials. Okay, and then 2000 to 2020. No Gen Z here. All right, interesting. No, it makes sense though.
Wait, move out of the way. I gotta take a picture though.
So, this is very important. I'm going to give you a story about this. Back in, so you can see the size of the generations. That baby boomer generation, in comparison to the one before, it almost doubled, right? That's a huge increase of that generation. So that was the biggest generation to date. When Gen X came, we were the smallest generation. Our generation was so small. We were the lost generation. We were the slackers, right? No one, we were like this kind of limbo, not knowing where to go. Because baby boomers had it all. They had the money. They still have the money. Millennials come in, huge generation. A lot of people in that generation, big time changes, cell phones and internet and all these different things, ways of communications. It's like mind blowing, right? And now we have the Gen Z, which is it's also a very large generation. You can see it's already higher than what the millennials were. Has been consistently at this high every year, growing, having people join that generation. They just topped out at 2020, so now the Gen Z is our new drinker. There's the 22-year-olds right now, right? What we have is there was back in the 1980s, if there was motorcycles were a big deal. Right, everybody was buying motorcycles, Honda, Yamasaki's. You go anywhere, there was everybody riding motorcycles everywhere. And Honda and Yamazaki were like we're making money, man. This is great. And all of a sudden, 1990s came around into the early 2000s, and all of a sudden, their sales dropped. You go, oh, what are we doing? Got to start marketing, start all these TV ads, Super Bowl ads, all these different things, and they couldn't figure out. Sales kept dropping. Marketing's increasing, spending more money on marketing, and sales keep dropping. Well, why did the motorcycle sales drop out in the 1990s? What's that? Helmet laws? No. Helmet laws are already in the 80s. So that baby boomer, that big generation, was riding motorcycles in the 1980s. They're the 20-something-year-olds, right? 20 to 30-year-old, 20 to 32-year-old is a motorcycle rider, right? That's your bread and butter. Huge generation, and they're all buying motorcycles, right? Gen X comes around. Well, our generation didn't have a lot of money. Our generation was a poorer generation, and it was a smaller generation. But the crazy thing they're looking at, the economy was good in the 80s. Economy was really good in the 90s. Why is it that we're not selling motorcycles when the economy is doing so good? Because the generation was so low. Because the reason the economy was doing so good in the 1990s was immigration. We had a lot of immigration coming in through the 80s and 90s, and they were in our economy spending money. The economy stayed high, never dropped, but the sales of motorcycles were low. Because the people who were potential buyers of it, the core buyer of a motorcycle, that market group was so small that it didn't translate, right? So that's where we see the way of thinking, was we have to think about our restaurant, who is our diner, and who's in our restaurants, and how do we connect with that person. So we have, this is really what it comes down to. You know, Gen Z is the new drinker, and every company right now is doing all this work on trying to figure out, how do I connect with the Gen Z, or what are the Gen Z? Oh, they're drinking Zima, they're drinking like seltzers. And I go back, when I was 20 years old, what was I drinking? You know, what were you guys drinking at 20 years old? It was whatever was cheap, whatever was accessible, was, easy, right? The only difference with this generation is looking for what's good for me, right? They're already thinking about like the planet and all that stuff. That's the big thing for them. But they're just learning to drink, right? Gen Z is our employee. Gen Z is our worker. Gen Z is the server, the bartender in the restaurants right now. The ones that are learning to become servers and become bartenders. That's who the Gen Z is right now. So for us, we just got to focus on them as a workforce and teach them how to get into the workforce and teach them the restaurant business and get them excited about that. That's our person there. Millennials, man, they're crazy because there's a big generation and they're the ones out dining everywhere, right? And the problem with millennials is that they don't go to the same spot every single time. They're always going to go somewhere different, right? There's no loyalty. They're always looking for something different, another experience. They always want to have a different Instagram moment. They always want to have a different, say I was here, I was there. It's the big FOMO, right, for them. So it's really hard as a restaurateur to track on that generation. But they're the ones that are coming to our restaurants and dining, but they're not the ones coming to the restaurants and spending a lot of money. Because the millennials don't have the same amount of money as a baby boomer. The baby boomer, Gen X, is this lost generation, as I said, small generation. We now have kids in college. We have kids that are growing up, and we have the money to go out and do all the things that we normally do in restaurants. We're looking at different sorts of dining. We're the beer drinkers. We're the ones that are looking for we were experimenting with wines, but we were not, ever spending a lot of money on wines, Talk to Tammy and anybody else. Who else is a Gen X here? Besides drinking at work, right? When you get those things for free, do you go out and spend $200 on a bottle of wine? I know I don't. I don't. I'm just not going to do it. It's like I can't afford it, right? I got to put kids in college, right? So that's a different generation. The baby boomers are the ones that had the money. Baby boomers did it for us. The only reason we're in this room right now is the baby boomers put us in this room, because in the 1970s, they're the ones that are just coming up, right? They're the ones purchasing. They're the ones that were watching the documentaries about how wine is good for us and how, we should be drinking Merlot and we should be, and then how we should be buying Napa wines, That's the generation. They were the ones with the money. They're the ones that kind of put dining in the scene. They're still the ones coming to our dinners. If I do a wine dinner, it's all baby boomers, right? I don't have any millennials. Very once in a while I have millennials. I don't have any Gen Zers, and sometimes the Gen X are going in there, but it's all baby boomers. But they're dying. They're not going to last longer. So we're in a situation that It's true. They're dying. It happens. We all die, right? And they're the ones that are going to go first. They're the ones that have the know-how of the dining, and we got to figure out how to keep the ones that are still around, but connect with these guys over here, right? There's the connection here. Forget about Gen X, okay? Forget about them. We got to focus on this guys, and then now here. No, the reason I say that is the sustainability. It comes down again to the size of the generation. It's not big enough to make a difference for your business, right? The changing your business is the big generation. Focus on the big generations. That's what we have to do. Because if we don't, it's just like the motorcycle thing. You're only in that dining situation at a certain time of your life. And how big is that generation when they're in that dining? Well, it's a millennial right now. Focus on what the millennial is looking for, right? That's what makes you viable. Find their interests and connect with them on those interests there. All right. Solution for viability. Ralph asked me to dive into a P&L. I don't think I'm going to do that today unless you guys have questions about that. But just to know your P&L, for those of you that are not on the management side of things, your P&L is your profit and loss statement. It tells you where your company is. And I think it's important for people to see a P&L because sometimes you don't understand why owners make certain decisions. And owners make certain decisions that are based on their profit and losses, right? And if you don't understand how much labor it takes to run a restaurant and how much labor takes into a P&L, or how much your rent, or how much just the fact that you have a restaurant and you have to keep the lights on, how much that fits into a P&L. When we think about it, most restaurants that are doing positive is 10% is like the standard, right? You're trying to get 10% of your profit there. So of your sales. If you're doing 10%, that's not a lot of money at the end of the day if you put all the time and energy into it. So your restaurant owners are in it. They have their houses in there. They have their properties into it. Their whole life stake is in there for 10% profit, right? It's not a big thing. Certain restaurants do a lot more, and other ones do negative, which is a sad thing because we see a lot more negatives out there than anything else. But the reason is to understand your viability is you got to know your P&L and how you, as that sommelier or that manager or that server in that restaurant, how you're going to make your owner ecstatic for you to be there and how they're going to push you to the next level, right?
To clarify that, which is an interesting point, because the last discussion we had with Will Costello, he was going over negotiating salaries and bonuses and increases in your salaries, and there were some people talking, there was a consensus of, I should be making more money, and I think that was where the P&L came in and said, well, where's that money coming from? Like, it should be a derivative of how much an increase in the wine sales
Yeah.
you're bringing to the business versus like, I just want more money. Cool, but like how to actually look at that from an owner's perspective, so the person who give you that money, how would you explain that you are worth that increase of 10 or 15% on a year-to-year basis?
It's right here. The next steps, and we're talking about exactly what we're talking about. How do you justify your position to get more money in the restaurant? How do you justify to become a beverage director for your company, right? How do you justify that? Well, top line sales versus pour cost. It's the way of thinking we always think, right? Does your owner think top line sales or does your owner think pour cost? You got to know the difference because some of them are confused. They all think all the same time. What does that really mean? Top line sales, how much money is coming into the door every single day, right? So top line sales would be like, for example, I buy this bottle of wine and this bottle of wine cost me $10 and I put it on the menu for $30. It's 30% pour cost. It's a normal pour cost, right? But as far as sales, it's only $30 going to the restaurant. If I charge this for $40 now we're at 25% pour cost. He loves that. The sales got higher, right? But then what happens is that someone knows that bottle and they know that at $40 they could buy it at the store for $15. Well, are they going to buy it? No. So that means my sales drop down, right? So top line sales doesn't matter anymore. But when they buy it, my pour cost looks really good. But what does it matter? What does your pour cost really matter? So for your owners, you have to understand what they're looking for. My owners, I want to keep keep this covered up. They look at both lines, and it's hard to manage a business when they're looking for both lines, because I can increase the sales, but all of a sudden they go, oh yeah, but you had a 35% wine cost on there, but we sold a lot of high-end wine that time, and we sold another $1,000 extra that month just on wine alone, but the pour cost is a little higher. But the sales are there. So what's more important to them? Well, that's why we just showing the P&L. Is you see how it breaks down. Maybe I'll just do this because I think that might be the best way of doing this. So these are your sales. Everything you put in for sales, every you look at the prior year, and then you see what your budget's going to be at, and then this is what your actual sales are, right? So here's your P&L. Here's a restaurant. This is a restaurant that's doing really well, right? Here's a restaurant that's doing really well. Last year they did $310,000. This year they're at $384,000. That's the total sales. You can see as a percentage of sales, this restaurant is doing about 71% of sales is food. That means they're probably charging a lot for food, so they're doing steaks and they're probably doing high-end seafood and things like that. Their beer, only 2.3%, not important. So am I going to, as a manager of this restaurant, am I going to put a lot of focus on beer? No, not at all. It's not the thing I want to focus on. They're at 8.9% on wine. Well, maybe it can be viable, especially if we get, wines that we can move forward. So you're at $34,000 during that month. But the main thing here is liquor. You can see 14% of their sales is devoted to liquor. That's almost twice the amount of wine, right, for this restaurant. So whoever's running that restaurant, they got to put some focus on the liquor and making sure that that line stays good while increasing the other lines, right? If we can make that happen, that's great. Here's the cost of sales. This tells you exactly how much I'm going to move down from the meat and stuff, and you can see the cost of sales here. Here's how much it cost them. That means these people bought $2,000 worth of beer, and they sold it for the $8,000, so they're at 26% pour cost on that. Here they have wine. This is the same thing. It's been $9,000. They sold it for $35,000. They're at 28%, right? So your owners are going to say, well, your budget at 27. Your budget at 27. You hit 28. That's not looking good for you, right? And if you're a sommelier and your budget, your bonuses on your pour costs, well, you probably didn't make bonus that time. But if you're bonused on top line sales, look at your sales. You increased your sales. You brought $3,000 more to the bottom line, right? But the pour cost was a little lower, right? At the end of the day, the pour cost is not bringing money to the restaurant, right? The pour cost doesn't bring money. All the pour cost does is take away money. But if I can figure it out so there's more money on the top line, that's going to be important for me, right? And how much more money is going to be. So you can see here with the liquor, it's $8,000. They spent less on their liquor than they did on their wine. That is why the pour cost is so low. So doesn't it make sense as an owner that you're going to put more focus on the money I'm going to spend less on? I'm going to spend less money on liquor and make more money on it at the end of the day, right? So that's what owner is looking at. So how do you become viable in a restaurant like this? Well, as a sommelier, you got to be able to figure out how you're going to be working on all those lines, right? You got to be able to, how am I going to increase my pour cost? I'm going to make that pour cost better without gouging the guest. At the same time, how am I going to make it so that my liquor line stays looking good, right? How do we do that? And that's the goal. And I'll show you a little later when we talk about that later. So at the end of the day, you can see now after this, after everything you spent in the restaurant, after everything you cost in the restaurant for food and beverage and all that stuff, you're left with $284,000. You're left with 74% profit, okay? 74% profit. Looks good, huh? But then comes all the business side of it. Here's your controllable expenses. Look at payroll. $138,000 on payroll. 35% of your sales go to payroll. So here's a restaurant, and this is doing really good because it's post-COVID. You can see the prior year at $30,000, their budget at $41,000. That tells me that they're short management. So they hit these numbers with less managers. So what does that mean for the management team? They're probably stressed out. They're probably working their asses off. They're probably short 2 managers with $11,000 missing there. Maybe it's a sous chef. Maybe it's a front of the house manager. Maybe it's a GM. Who knows? But you're missing managers there. So yeah, it looks good on there. But at 35%, well, your budget at 41, right? That's what your budget's supposed to be at. But they're working their asses off, right? And if you want to increase, right, this is a salary. If we had 5 managers on there, salary is $73,000 for those managers. $73,000 for 5 managers. Well, some of those managers aren't going to work for $73,000, right? They got to work for a lot more than that. So you can see that if we need 5 managers, and actually this would probably short a manager or 2, we probably need 6 or 7 managers, including sous chefs, right? That means that increase there is probably going to be another $10,000, $11,000. So you're going to increase that right there. So when we look at the number at the bottom here, after more expenses, bank charges, credit card fees, all the silverware you ordered, all the complimentary meals, everything that was wasted, any sort of rental equipment, any sort of like menu expenses. Well, they didn't do any menu printing that time, so they didn't have to worry about menus, right? But if they do a menu printing, there's something breaks down, R&M. Like the year before, they spent like $3,000 on R&M. This year, only $1,500, so half on R&M. Maybe because the stove was working this time. But if it breaks down, that's another $1,500. So everything they're seeing, every broken item in the restaurant is a deduction. Deduction. Total operating expenses now is 46.9%. Right here, this line here, this is what so much we've operated on. Now, this is all the fixed expenses. We haven't got the rent yet. Now you have your rent. So you're at rent, and this is a fairly good rent there. That's $17,000 for the rent, and there's a percentage of rent that you have to pay on CAM. And then we have accounting expenses. You know, your accountants and everybody else that makes things, your payroll companies and all that. So by the end of the day, this restaurant actually, the EBITDA was 18.2%. Great year, right? That's with managers dying on the floor. Right? That's with probably, nothing that broke, or maybe it broke, but it got pushed into another period, right? So they don't see it that period. But here's a restaurant that made $69,000, right? $69,000, great for that owner, right? This is a good restaurant, right? Working overtime really hard. As most restaurants aren't like this, right? And if they're not like that, how are you going to change those lines? As workers in the restaurant, how are you going to change those lines and be viable to get an increase? How are you going to be not making $73,000, right? Because right now, in order to do this and bust your butt, you're making $70,000, and that's probably because they probably had less than 5 managers working there. So how do you do this for yourselves? Let's dive into that here. So top line sales versus poor costs. Understand that there's a difference between there. But the most important thing is you need to diversify. Because in this ever-changing environment, there is no longer a sommelier on the floor. From now on, there is people who manage a restaurant and also run the bar program, run the wine program, do the beer training, all that stuff. And you need to diversify. So if you have not gone into learning about spirits, learning about beer, and learning about wine, you're not viable in that restaurant, right? You have to be viable on all those lines, including food. If you don't know your food, you're not doing the restaurant a service at all. So you need to be able to diversify yourself and get away from just the idea of this is what I'd like to do. You need to start focusing on how you retain the consumer. How do you retain the consumer? What is it you're going to do to retain the consumer? What are you going to do to retain the employee? And how are you going to create your worth? So we're jumping to these points here. First of all, diversify. This is all the different certifications out there, right? Go and do all these certifications. Do them all, Don't just sit there and say, I'm going to become a master sommelier. Unless you want to be a master sommelier and you want to eventually work as a master sommelier, then by all means, go for it, man. But in this industry, there's no master sommelier working the floor, right? So it doesn't happen. So if you're trying to get into negotiate your salary, you need to have all those certifications. So then you're the one-stop shop for your restaurant, right? They don't need to hire anybody else. They'll give you that second salary to you. Retain the consumer. First of all, we talk about the slow times. Use the slow times wisely. Connect with the guests. Making sure that they ask for you by name every single time. They have to ask you by your name. Once your owner hears your name from people on the outside, it's more important than hearing it from the inside, right? You can tell your owner everything you do. Doesn't matter. It's when other people tell your owner what you've done, then he goes, oh, okay. So making sure you're connecting with your guests and making sure they're calling your name. Memorable experiences. One of the things I've been focusing on in my group is expected versus unexpected experiences. Every millennial right now, or every guest coming out now, is emotional connection, right? Here I have festivals that we do at our restaurants. Here I see this girl doing the limbo at one of our margarita festivals, right? I guarantee after she won the limbo contest and won a bottle of tequila, she will always remember that restaurant as the place she won the limbo contest. It will stick for her forever. It's an emotion that sticks with you forever. We have emotions all the time. The thing is with emotions, we only remember the peaks and remember the lows. So if we all have more peaks, then those lows get forgotten. The middle ones are always forgotten. Every middle emotion we have, everything that kind of it was good, that was good. Oh, that was good. Oh, I like that. It's forgotten a year later, right? The things that stick in your mind are those peaks. So we're going to focus on peak emotions for our guests. So I did things where I call this, I get with my vendors and my suppliers, and I use them to help me build these out in my restaurants. Expected and unexpected experiences. An expected experience is very simple. How many of you guys have open table systems? Open table or some sort of like a reservation system. Okay? So a reservation system, on the reservation system, you put an experience on there that is pre-ordered. So it's something like right now we just started oyster month, so we're doing a bottle of champagne with 6 oysters. The vendor's paying for the oysters. They get a bottle of champagne for $120. They get oysters included. It's expected. It's already done. It's an expected experience. It's sales are already in there before they walk into the restaurant. They already ordered it when they come in, right? That's an expected experience. We do build those expected experiences. People go, oh, making a reservation. Oh, they also got this going on. Oh, great. They have a flight happening or whatever it might be, right? Unexpected are the stuff I'm really excited about. Unexpected are things what I'm doing at the table side that I empower my servers to do. Like all of a sudden you're at a table and someone's enjoying bottle of Volcan, and guess what? My server comes up and goes, hey, oh, you like that Volcan? Great, yeah, it's very good. By the way, check this out. This is something that JC, the Volcan rep, gave to me. It's a playlist of the music they listen to at the distillery, and it's a QR code to the Spotify playlist. The guest connects with the server blows the guest away. It's probably not a big deal. It's not a big thing, but the guest goes back and they put it in their car and they think about the restaurant and they think about the experience they had. They share it later with a friend of theirs, you know? How do I presentations? We talk about, are we doing magnum presentations of the restaurants by the glass? Things like that for wines. Wine's really difficult for this because there's not a lot we can do with wine unless you're doing the table services and all that sort of stuff. But most restaurants don't have access to that sort of thing or the labor to make it happen. So how do we make those things kind of viable? So we got to get creative. So what I did is I did presentations like special menus. Like this QR code. There's a QR code. You go on the QR code. You take it pops you to a little quiz, like those BuzzFeed quizzes you do. And the BuzzFeed quiz goes and it says it's a woman in wine quiz. So it's a woman winery, and it tells you like which woman do you like? Do you like Michelle Obama? Do you like Taylor Swift and all that stuff? You pick your choices. Then goes the next thing. What color is your best color? All these different things. Personality quiz. By the end of the 5 questions, it brings you to the wine that we selected for you. So, by the personality, there's the wine from that woman winemaker. It's a Sauvignon Blanc because they like more happy style things, or, like Taylor Swift. Or Michelle Obama is a little bit more like this red wine, and all these different things. But the guest walks away as having an experience in the restaurant that was unexpected, right? How do they order their wine? They've paired it to their personality. So things along those lines where you got to create those things. Those events that we bring guests to our restaurant. Not everybody has the room for them all, but if you do, take advantage of it and take ownership of those events. So then your owners say, oh, not only does he work the floor, but he also did this extra thing we never did. We brought in, extra $5,000-$6,000 that afternoon to the restaurant. These are some things we've done in the past. Wine classes, cocktail classes. Guests love this stuff. To sit in a group like this and do like a tasting of Burgundy with your guests and you leading it. Not only it forces you to go and do some research and learn the stuff, and then you teaching it, you learn even more, and then your guests think you're a freaking all-star. And they come and talk about you, and all of a sudden they're talking about, oh my God, Maurice did this thing on Burgundy, and then your owner's here, and they go, oh my God, and how much was $2,000 around in that day? And it was a day that were closed during lunch, and we used a room like this, and we did a seminar, or we did a cocktail class. We did a Mexican spirits class, made cocktails with our guests. Blown away by that stuff. They'll always remember that. COVID now lets us sell wines, lets us sell spirits. So my first wine sale, it was at Island Prime, and it was we had a bunch of wine that was left over from previous menus that we had. There were like it was 97 vintages of California that we had tons of stuff left that were just dying, right? Because that vintage, you all know, didn't last very well. And so we did is I did a wine sale. And what I did is brought all the wines from our cellars and all the restaurants, brought into one room, and in 2 hours we sold $33,000 of wine. Of just people walking around. We opened bottles, pour it, and everything like that. That kicked it off. My owners were blown away. Oh, we got to do this all the time. So of course, doing this all the time is really difficult. It's a lot of work, but doing it once a year, it makes it, you're bringing extra revenue to your restaurant. Your guests talk about it. They look forward to the next time it's going to happen again. And then it makes you look like an all-star again. Okay? Interactive creations, people want to do things in the restaurants. They're no longer just want to come and dine. They want to do things. So we do things like flowers and blossoms or bubbles and blossoms, where you make flower arrangements and drink wine. You make succulents and drink tequila. You do cocktail classes. I mean, people want to be interacting. So if you can spearhead that in your restaurants, you're just going to bring people in and have an experience that they normally wouldn't do, right? And then trips. Go out there and travel. You got to get out there and see the world, because when you come back, you have more knowledge, and you share that with your employees, you share that with your teams, share that with your guests. It's going to be, it takes you to the next level. One thing I do is I do the trips for my guests. So right now this month, we're doing Paso Robles month, where we actually are giving away a trip to Paso Robles for a 2-night stay for our guests, for 2 people, at each event that we do. We're doing 5 wine dinners. At each wine dinner, they're going to win a trip to Paso Robles. Easy. The wineries take care of it all. They want their guests there. They take care of it all, and we look like all stars because we gave it to them, right? And so that's what we're trying to do is how do you get those guests engaged again? Yeah.
Do you find that the attendance of these events, you would get more of a turnout if you have a price or like attendance because there's an exclusivity to it?
Always charge for them.
It's like a free event.
Always charge for them.
Brings more people.
Always charge for them. The only one I don't charge for was the wine sales. Because they're going to be buying the wine there. And usually what I like to do is give them some wine to taste, and they end up, the more they taste, the more drinking, the more buying they do. But no, charge for it, because that's the only way you make the revenue. If you don't charge for it, it's unless someone's paying for it for you. Sometimes the vendor might pay for it all. They might do that too. But the thing is about the employee, it's retaining our employees, because the only way any of this can happen is if we can get our employees to get our backs and making sure that they're, engaged as well. So training, I think that's kind of when I was in the restaurant in Island Prime, I was really doing a lot of training and doing training with other restaurants that are coming in, tasting groups that we should do. That tasting group was big for the sommeliers in San Diego. So it brought people to Island Prime, and my owners heard about it, and I knew it was happening. So it was the idea that there's education happening that's going to lead to sales, and keeping your guests, your employees engaged. So I try to keep my employees engaged. Employees are moving around all the time, and I'm saying something to Somcom. I do things for them where I can get them engaged. It doesn't work. No, not all the time. They end up leaving, but good for them. They should move on. Everybody should grow, right? So I don't hold that against them, but I know that they look forward to this sort of stuff. So things that we do, for example, here I took them to Oaxaca, where we make our own mezcal. We actually did the harvest there. We crush. In fact, this is the mezcal that we make for our restaurant group. So this is what they get to have that experience and talk about. We did a beer with Women on the Mission, a Mission Brewery, where it was only women to pick the style of beer, because back in the day, it's all men doing the brewing and women had no choice. So let the women do the brewing. They made their own beer, and we did Women on the Mission. We do volleyball tournaments, or we have one of the winning teams of the volleyball tournament. We do bar competitions. We want to make sure they're engaged and employees are feeling part of something, keeping them there. Invite them to tastings. Like if Oliver Crumb does a luncheon somewhere and they're inviting the buyer there, well, bring an employee with you, that makes it's huge for them. It's like they'll remember that forever. They don't get invited to that all the time. And make their work experience memorable. So when they're in the restaurant, when you're hiring employees, make that interview like a wow. There's certain times in our life that we make choices and changes, and new jobs are a big change. So that new job has got to be like a big experience. It's got to make them remember that forever. They come in like, asking questions. So let's say here's as you're interviewing the employee, like ask what kind of coffee they have. In the first day, have that cup of coffee for them from Starbucks or whatever it is. Make them connect with you emotionally. That's the other part, is we need to connect with our employee. Call them out on their birthdays, send them newsletters, call them out, all that sort of stuff. So how do you create your worth? Well, first of all, selecting wines is not a job. Sorry, it doesn't exist. I know that everybody wants to be sommelier because they're going to be the person to select wines. There's very few people out there that have that job, okay? And good kudos to them. I don't. I don't have that job. Working the floor is tiring. We all work the floor. The only reason I'm in my job right now is because I worked the floor, but I put years of working the floor and I was bored. I was so bored. What I would do, I would come home early in the mornings, I would wake up and I would write. I would write my blog. And someone told me to write a blog. Why? Because people want to hear about your wine experiences. No one wants to hear my wine experiences. People want to hear your wine experiences. I didn't know that. I had no idea. And the moment I put it on the internet, it was all of a sudden like the truth. It was like, no matter whatever's in writing, for some reason, it's like everybody believes it. And I was making up shit in there. It was fun. I was having fun. I was making jokes. If you ever seen my wine blog, it's just like me interviewing Michael Jackson or me interviewing Tupac Shakur on his wine choices or things like that are just stupid, right? But people thought of me as being, now I'm the expert. Like I became an expert in wine without ever thinking myself as an expert, right? Because I wrote about it. But I was so bored in the restaurant. So if you're bored in the restaurant, do something else outside of it and bring it back into the restaurant. You need to show, that's how you can show your value, but the only way to do it is be creative, because nowadays things are changing and you got to be moving with it and just be the first one to do something differently, right? Approach it differently. Teach those around you and then build them up, okay? So as you're talking to employees, and you're talking to your bosses, always talk positively about your employees. Tell them how great those employees are doing, because the moment that you tell somebody how good somebody else is, that person's going to look at you and say, oh, well, you're the one that taught them, so you must be really, really good, right? Might not be. They're probably better than you, right? But because you're saying it and they've seen you saying that, then they're gonna have a different vision of you. So that's how your owners are going to see that. Talk your staff up and connect with your guests. We said that already. And the last thing is social media. I didn't understand how important it was. I don't do it anymore as much as I used to, but back in the day when I did that blog, I was really into it, and I was on Twitter, and I told Tammy, get on there, right? And you said, oh, why? And we started doing it. All of a sudden, guess what happened? People start following you, start asking you questions, and all of a sudden, like, it opens up this world, like, all of a sudden you're an expert, and it's like, well, I'm not really an expert, but okay. But it led to sales, and your ownership sees that, and people know that they're following you and they're asking for you. That's important. And that is it. Thank you.
Real